You're listening to the Make Mental Podcast.
What's up, Make Mental listeners? I'm Alyssa Herman, former athlete and founder of Beyond the Athlete. If you are a former athlete too, then you know the hardest part of retiring isn't leaving behind your sport, it's losing your teammates. This is why I created The Locker Room, an online community where former athletes rebuild structure, purpose, and healthy competition, all alongside a new team who truly understands them. Make Mental listeners can join free for 30 days. Just use code MAKEMENTAL at the link below to request your spot on the roster.
Goe Globel is a free-flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Goe Globel reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world. Hey guys, before we dive into today's episode sponsors, I've got a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying the podcast, learning something new, getting inspired, or even just entertained, take a second to like, subscribe, and share this episode or your favorite. When you support us, we can keep supporting you with much better content, deeper insights, and the stories you actually care about. You deserve quality content that continues to inform, uplift, and connect, and every little bit of your support helps us deliver just that. So please, hit that button, tell a friend, and let's keep building this community together. Thank you. Hello again, beautiful people. Welcome back to yet another episode on the Make Mental Podcast. I'm Caleb Munski, as always, and we have a guest episode for you today. We're joined by the usual incredible person, but this is a passionate advocate for mental health who is really making waves with her work in uplifting communities, her heart and her passion for Project Love You, which we'll get into, just reflects her commitment to spreading positivity and supporting mental wellness, values that obviously hit home with our mission over here at supporting mental health. We're so excited to dive into not only her journey, but explore how she's creating an impact and hear her insights on navigating life's challenges with purpose. So Aubrey, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, Caleb, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of just get the conversation flowing. I personally have a few questions for you, but yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself and we can go from there.
Yeah, so as you know, my name is Aubrey. My last name is Gallione. I know, a little tough, very Italian. I grew up in the space of competitive cheerleading. I spent most of my life in the sport. I also cheered in college, and then I went on to coach D1. And in the process of coaching, I coached from a young age too. I don't know if all the towns have these like feeder rec programs that I had in the city that I grew up in, but I started coaching when I was in high school, and I was coaching, elementary school kids. And so coaching has always been like a big part of my life. And after graduating, I wanted to coach D1, like I said, and I ended up losing an athlete to suicide. And it really changed the trajectory of my life. And that is my why. That is where Project Love You was born out of. It was honestly born from a place of like grief and a deep season of loss for me. I went through a stretch in my life where I had, lost a lot of people. I lost myself in a lot of ways during that time. And I was doing all the things I thought that I should be doing to keep myself together, but I was still like very much struggling. So when I went through that season of loss, I reframed the way that I was coaching my college athletes, and I started to focus on nurturing them from the inside out. And in return, not only did they become the best athletes that they could be, but they also became better people. And that is why a majority of people coach a sport. So that is where Project Love You was born.
Yeah, I couldn't help but notice, and I think so many of us feel this. I know I did personally. At one point, you said you did what you thought was helpful for yourself, yet you still felt lost. It was something to that nature, and
Yeah.
that hits home to me so much. So I want to know what that was for you. Obviously, there's a ton of different self-help methods and a ton of different therapies that can help you honestly grieve in the moment when
Right.
you obviously we're very sorry to hear what happened in your coaching experience. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. But how, what were you doing? And again, this could work for other people listening. This is just Aubrey's personal experience, but what were you doing that you thought was helpful, and why was it maybe not in the moment?
I think it's tough, right? We go through 12 years of required education in this country, but nobody really teaches you how to have a healthy relationship with your mind and your body. And with self-love, I think there's this misconception that it's like this positive, positive quotes and like bubble baths and like self-care. And while all those things are great, I was doing those things thinking that it would heal what was going on internally. And the longer that I sat in those spaces, the more I realized I wasn't doing anything for myself but fixing the exterior and not the interior. And so through that process, I continued to experience a lot of pain in my life. I went through like a really bad breakup, and it got to the point where I couldn't recognize myself anymore. Looked in the mirror, I didn't know who was looking back at me. And coming from someone who spent majority of their childhood and their life being like super extroverted and very confident from what other people could see, when I had that moment of looking in the mirror where I didn't recognize who I was anymore physically or mentally, I realized I was like, oh, like something has to give because what I'm doing is not working for me. And it was in that moment that really I had that like aha moment. And it took a lot of internal work for me to make it out on the other side. And I think that in that moment, like I can still remember the day that it happened. I was so low, right? And there was parts of me that carried this anger towards Hannah, the person that I had lost that was so close to me, because it was the how could she leave me, right? Like, how could you do this to me? How could you put this, on all the people that you love? And in that moment, when I looked myself in the mirror and I was so low, didn't recognize myself, that I also no longer wanted to live, I could only release that anger towards her because I finally understood. I finally could empathize in a deeper way as to why she moved the way that she did. Now, I don't ever think that's the answer, obviously, but it was this moment where I released all that anger towards her and all that like shame and guilt and all these feelings that come up when you lose someone in this way, that I realized like I had to make the choice to change my life. And it didn't, and it was way past the fixing my hair or going to the gym and losing weight and being happier with the way that I looked from the outside perspective. I had to put in the work internally.
Yeah, how old were you when this happened?
So I lost Hannah in 2017, but I didn't really have this like epiphany aha moment till I really started to um release that game and that shame and that guilt. And that was after like a really bad breakup that I went through, I would say like probably like 3 years ago. So I'm
Okay.
32 now. Um I experienced grief and death at a really young age in my life. I lost the first person um from a death standpoint to suicide when I was 15. I was just a freshman in high school. I lost a friend, and that was like the first experience with like true grief that I encountered. And as I got older, it kind of was just like this trickle effect, and I learned to bury it in different ways. And then it finally got to that point when I was just so low after experiencing so much like heartbreak that I realized I had to unpack all these feelings that I had been carrying for so long because the weight was getting way too heavy.
Yeah, when you say bury it, what do you mean? Because I know bury it can mean so many different things to so many different people.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I was someone that was extremely extroverted. I've been an athlete my whole life, especially in the space of competitive cheerleading. We're just taught to smile and wave and be performative. So I think that was ingrained into me, especially as an athlete. You get hurt, you keep pushing through it. It is what it is. That is something that's ingrained into you when you have this like competitive nature into you. So I applied that into every aspect of my life. So every single time I would feel pain, grief, heartache, whatever it is, I would learn to just bury it and act like it didn't exist and just keep it pushing. I took it on the chin and I woke up every day and I put one foot in front of the other. And while that's a great trait to have, if you don't unpack the things that you're experiencing, those feelings, they will eat you alive if you let them. And I had gotten to that point where, like I said, I was carrying so much weight emotionally that I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it. And I had to make the choice to face all the things that were uncomfortable, all the pain that I'd experienced in my life. But I didn't feel like I had spaces offered to me that gave me the opportunity to feel like I could be vulnerable, like I could be honest with the way that I was feeling without it, being turned back and used against me in some way.
Yeah, the analogy that I like to turn to is with like a when you're in school, right? And you're carrying, well, I'm gonna sound old myself when I say this, but when you're carrying your textbooks, um,
Right,
you can only carry so many textbooks for so long. There's a reason why when you go from grade 6 to grade 7, you get new textbooks, 7 to 8 new textbooks. You can't just
Mhm.
keep carrying them. At some point, you're going to drop to the ground. It's just going to be too heavy. And we can use that analogy in life, I guess, for those who no longer carry textbooks. Your laptop only has so much storage, right? Once it hits
Right.
full capacity, you either need to get a new laptop, it starts to work slower, you have to delete some stuff, you have to
Mm.
pick and choose. From your standpoint, obviously, again, very difficult, and sorry to hear that you lost someone so early in your life to suicide. You started, I guess, given my analogy, collecting textbooks. And again, that doesn't do justice to what happened.
Right.
At such a young age in your life, when you decided it was time to look internally, what's the first thing you personally looked at in order to help yourself kind of, again, to use my analogy, take those textbooks out of your bag?
Right. I think the hardest part about self-love and mental health is it forces you to confront the parts of yourself that you don't necessarily like. And that's why most people don't do it because it's uncomfortable. And so I think my first step was allowing myself to genuinely feel the things that I felt. Like I said, I've been someone that was so easy at just slapping on a smile and keeping it pushing because I was so used to being everything to everyone else that I didn't realize how I wasn't showing up for me. I wasn't showing up for myself and allowing myself to truly feel through the emotions that I was experiencing. I say this super often, but feelings are really just visitors. And if you allow them to pass through, you'll understand that they're not permanent. And while some feelings are heavier than others, they're not permanent. They come and go. And it was really just about me allowing myself to feel for the first time and acknowledging the things that I had experienced and saying that I wasn't okay. I was so used to just being strong that even just admitting to myself and the people around me that something was wrong and I wasn't okay was like a really big first step for me. But that was like a tipping point for me. And it really did changed my life because I could finally, for once in my life, exhale. And once I admitted to myself and admitted to the people around me that I wasn't okay, I started to find ways that I could heal. I started to pour into the things that made me happy, to find things that made me feel joy and not be worried about what that looked like to anybody else.
Yeah, and impermanence, or the notion of impermanence, seemed to give you some sense of relief, which
Right.
which is fantastic that you found that. How does this notion of impermanence play out in your life today? Because it is a tricky concept to understand.
Now, being an entrepreneur and a retired athlete, I have this saying where I just tell myself like fail fast, right? You try a bunch of different things and you figure out what works and what doesn't and you're allowed to release that and move on to the next thing. So fail quick. And I think that there's this weird shame that comes with, failing, the word failure. What did that even looks like? And for me, the only way that I can grow is if I learn from that failure. And growth is so important in every aspect of life from a mental standpoint, also from a professional standpoint, from a relationship standpoint. There's just so many aspects of it that taught me to release that control that I had to have over the outcome of a situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, when you were speaking, I couldn't help but think of my life coaches or my therapists that I've seen, and they always ask me to define success, but they never really asked me to define failure. And obviously, that's probably because they don't want a ton of negative thoughts to creep in during a therapy session or life
Right.
coach session. But we're not in a therapy session or life coach session. So I guess in the moment, if you can think back to when you were kind of in this darker time in your life, what did failure, I guess, what was your definition of failure then? And how has it changed now?
Yeah, so I think as human beings, we romanticize concepts in our brain, right? We can close our eyes and envision the dreams and the goals that we have. So when it doesn't pan out the way that we had so deeply romanticized, to me, that feels like failure. I failed myself in some capacity because I didn't live out the vision that I had for myself. But the older I get, the more you realize that everybody's journey looks different and there's no one right path or wrong path to take. As long as it's leading me to the same place and you're leading with passion and the thing that you're, most passionate about, you'll make it there. But I think for a really long time, and this is something that's been a part of me my whole life, but I guess I've been like sort of like a control freak, right? Like I envision something, I know I want to achieve it, I want it, and then I execute it. I plan out, I map it out in my head, and then I have to get it. Especially this is very common with athletes, right? When
Yes. Yes.
we don't win, or we don't have the game winning goal, whatever it may be, that failure feels so incredibly heavy and it will stop you from putting one foot in front of the other and succeeding after that failure is over. But the only way to grow and learn from it is to accept, sit with it, and then process it to be able to not repeat the same cycles in your life. And that applies to every aspect of life, relationships, sports, professionalism, like any of those things. But failure is just so drastically different than what it used to be. For me, I was so hard on myself, and I still very much am. All these things that I teach other people, like I remind them, like, I don't have the blueprint. I don't have it all figured out. I am a human being just like everybody else. It's just about actively making the choice to put forth the effort to be better, to grow, to be more accepting. But like my past version of myself, Aubrey, failure was this like deep dark thing that would like the cloud that hangs over your head when you're walking from place to place and you're trying to accomplish your goals, and it feels like shame. But as I get older and I'm failing fast and I'm seeing what works for me and what makes me happy and what doesn't, it's way more accepting. It's a part of life. Like pain and failure and grief, all these things, like they are inevitably a part of life. How we respond to them is a choice that we make. But if you don't choose to unpack those heavy feelings, you'll repeat the same cycles in your life over and over again. And I just finally got to the point where I'm like, I'm done living the same life, in a different font every single day. And until I put the work in to unpack how I was repeating the same cycles in my life, was only, my ability to make it out on the other side and to change my life in different ways.
Yeah. And it kind of relates to to the notion of impermanence, right? Failure is
Right.
also impermanent. However,
Right.
if you don't address it, if you don't sit with it, work through it, it can have a tendency to show up more often, whatever your definition of failure is, and vice
100%.
versa with success, right? It's never 50-50 in literally anything in life. But now that you have the skills to work through this failure, obviously, I know you're big into cheer and you coach and you kind of advise. How do you teach your students this without just giving them the answer? Because I know I'm a very firm believer in experience. Experience is the best teacher. And again, in a world where you can just go, hey, Chat GPT, this is how I'm feeling. Can
Mm,
you give me ways to feel better? It's like, okay, they can give you ideas, but they don't know you. They don't know unless you're completely honest with the program, they can't spit out anything perfect. And again, I don't know
right.
if they can legally. So you're not might not even be looking in the right place. How do you as a
Mhm.
teacher guide them now that you've experienced a lot?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that the main method that I use is just allowing people to show up exactly as they are and getting them to empathize with the people around them, right? It's about connecting to yourself, but also connecting to the others that are in the same room as you and understanding that as human beings, we all experience very similar feelings. They might not be from the same experience, but a lot of us experience pain, shame, guilt, especially as an athlete. And it's really just about letting people show up and telling them that they're exactly enough who they are, no matter if they make those mistakes. Like those mistakes are a part of life, but it's learning not to shame yourself in the process of that so that you can, accept your mistakes, you can forgive yourself and you can learn and you can grow. But it really is just about giving people the space to empathize with other people. You know, failure and fear and guilt and shame, all these emotions that we've been talking about, they can be very isolating. But it's just your brain playing a trick on you, right? Like we all experience these feelings, but because there is this, stigma around speaking them out loud and it making you look weak, people internalize them. And that internalization is such an isolating feeling. So I feel like the only way to, help people to, go through these experiences is to give them spaces to be open and to be honest with each other and themselves.
Yeah, I'm gonna, if it's okay, maybe pick apart this theory a little bit, and then we can
Yeah, yeah,
have
yeah,
a
of
friendly
course.
discussion with it. I mean, I agree with you. I just always have the opposite perspective in mind when we talk about these things, right? Like not gonna say the non-believers, but maybe the skeptics. When you talk about letting people show up as they are 100%, and I guess as an athlete and a coach, someone freshly out of the athletic world myself, I guess we can stay in the realm of athletics. But again, there is
Hmm.
crossover. How do you avoid complacency in that? Because a lot of times you can just say, oh, well, you've been 75% for the last 6 months. Like, yeah, you gave 100% of that 75%, but like, we can't let you sit here at 75%.
That's a really great question. Think complacency stems from comfort, right? Allowing someone to feel comfortable. And with these emotions, also being an athlete, you have to be able to sit in the discomfort of a feeling in order to help it, help it to grow, to make you grow, to be a better athlete, to be a better person. But a lot of the times people aren't willing to sit with that discomfortable, like that discomfort, that uncomfortable feeling, and they don't grow from it. So I think I completely can understand what you're, speaking about when it comes to complacency, especially as an athlete. But I think it's about sharing and having those uncomfortable conversations that people might avoid just because they don't want to face them, whether that be from a skill standpoint, like, hey, you fell short here, because they don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable, or talking about, a scenario in which they felt a certain type of way. But again, people don't share those feelings because it makes them feel weak. So they, bottle them up in any capacity. But yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question, or an interesting way to think about it. I think at the end of the day, if you want to change and you want to become the best version of yourself, you have to make that choice. Like nobody can do it for you, right? Someone can lead you to the water, but they can't make you drink it. You have to be able to be self-aware enough to know where you're falling short or where you could be pouring into yourself in order to be a better person, in order to be a better athlete. You know what I mean? So it's really this like deep desire to want to change and to want to be better. That has to come from within.
Yeah, wonderfully answered. And I think as a teammate, as a coach, honestly, as a team captain, if you're listening to this, you do have a sense of responsibility for yourself, right? For your own emotions to want to do that. But you also have a sense of responsibility when you sign up to be part of a team to look after your teammates who become pretty much like family members for however long you're with them.
100%.
We can allow people to show up at whatever their 100% is, even if it is 6 months, like I said. At what point, or maybe not any point at all, is that, again, doing them a disservice, even if it's not complacency, even if they are going to get help, even if they, well, I guess if they are going to get help, it wouldn't matter because they understand the reason why they're feeling the way they are, why they
Right.
might not be at 100. And again, 100% all the time is unattainable. Don't worry if you're at 95 one day, 10 one. Like,
Mhm.
as long as if you
Right.
know or think something's up, chances are something is up, right? I guess what I'm
Right.
trying to ask you now is, okay, we notice this teammate or yourself at 75%. We'll start with the teammate. How do you have this conversation with a teammate because it is a tricky situation, right? Sometimes teammates get angry and blow up on you and say nothing's wrong because they don't know how to process their emotions. Sometimes nothing could be wrong and it was an incorrect observation. How do we have this healthy conversation of, I don't think you're doing well, sport aside,
Mhm.
let's get you some help?
Right. Yeah, I think this is a really important question. People get so fixated on showing up correctly that sometimes it eliminates us from showing up at all, right? You're worried about saying the wrong thing. I think of so many times in which I experienced death in my life and I didn't hear from someone that I really thought would be present for me. And then when you unpack that with them at a later date, it's like, I was so worried that I was going to say the wrong thing that I said nothing at all. So I say all this to say there is so much importance to just simply showing up, regardless if you feel uncomfortable or if you feel like the words aren't going to come out correctly. Allowing someone the space to say, "Hey, I see you. And I also know you well enough to know that something's going on. And it might be okay if you don't want to completely unpack it right now, but I'm here whenever whenever you do want to." That goes so much further than what most people realize. All these feelings can feel so isolating so to have someone who can see it and know that you're not your best self and might not have the answers for you as to how we can get you to that 100%, like you said, but just feeling like there is a body and there's someone next to you who cares about you enough to acknowledge that will do numbers for that person. And so it can be uncomfortable, and that is a part of life. Nobody again wants to sit in that discomfort or think that they're going to upset someone that they love, whether it be in an athletic standpoint or just in everyday life with your relationships, family members, platonically, romantic, whatever it may be. But it's about just giving the space and the opportunity to start that conversation. That is what is most important. It's not about showing up correctly. Like I said, there's no blueprint to how this works. Nobody has all the answers to life, but showing someone that you care about them in a moment that they need it is really, really important.
Yeah, and again, the parallels between doing that for a teammate, doing it for a family member, doing it for a coworker, doing it for
Mhm.
yourself, it just transcends really. I mean, it goes across all aspects of life. Again, from a sports standpoint, that might just be like, hey, I can see you're a little tired today. I'm a soccer player, so if the ball comes down your side of the field and you need to take a half a second off, like let me know. I'll
Right.
take longer on my throw in. Or if you need to take a sub today, that's okay. Like you're a good enough player where you're not going to lose
Mhm.
your spot. Or like if they're not comfortable going to a coach, or maybe go to the team's trainer, come to me. Like there's just like you said, just being there, even when it's incredibly uncomfortable for you, know that they're probably also incredibly uncomfortable as well. So that's okay. You can be
Right.
uncomfortable in it together. And actually, they might help you realize some things about yourself that you didn't
Mm.
even notice, right? You could be feeling tired and not know why. And then they just describe it
Right.
perfectly because they're going through similar experiences you day to
Mhm.
day. I mentioned at the beginning of that other question, you being there for your teammates. Now let's flip it to the second part of that question of, I need help
Mm.
myself, but I have no idea how to word it. What do I do?
Yeah, I think it's very challenging, especially if you're someone like me who is everything to everybody else, right? I'm the go to, I'm the phone call in the middle of the night. So for me, I hate expressing to someone that I'm unwell because it makes me feel like a burden or it makes me feel like they can't come to me in that moment when they're going through something. And I never want to make someone feel that way. But me and my best friend, we do this thing where if one of us is experiencing anything in any capacity, and we might not be able to have the space or the time to unpack it, we just text each other and we say 6 minutes. And that means that I need 6 minutes of your time to just either sit in silence or to talk about something not related to the way that I'm feeling or to unpack the way that I'm feeling. But to just know that someone is there in that short amount of time, like life gets really busy. But it can be very challenging to admit that you need help. And the hardest part is a lot of the times I don't have the answers to articulate the way that I'm feeling. I just know that I'm feeling, a certain type of way and I don't enjoy this feeling. And that's okay. But being able to just express to simply just say, I'm not okay. I don't know why. I don't have a reason to point to it. I don't know why I'm sad today, but I am sad. That's a huge step. And it's something that I struggled with and I finally gained my footing on, is just simply being able to verbally say it out loud. I'm not okay, or I need help, whatever that may look like to anyone else. But taking that first step and just trying to reach out and speaking to someone is so important. I think that people forget we were not put on this earth to carry everything by ourselves. Like, we crave human connection just as human beings, and those things are normal. Leaning on people close to you or learning how to reach out and articulate yourself in those moments when you're not quite sure how you're feeling, but you know that you need assistance in some capacity, that is a leadership. Like, that is something that you learn as a leader. And in sports, it's really tough. And I think back to like my college days being a captain, and everybody is looking to you, right? Everybody's looking to you to have all the answers. All of a sudden you're like, well, who can I go to? Who's there for me when I need it? That part is very challenging. And it's something that I've navigated through as I've gotten older. And it's tough. It's not easy in any capacity, but really just being able to sit with someone that you trust and you know cares about you, to just simply say, like, I'm going through something and I don't know what it is, but I need you to just be present and sit with me. Like, those people are so important in your life. And like I said, they might not have all the answers, but to feel in that moment like you're not physically and completely alone can sometimes be a matter of life or death. And that's why it's something that I've worked through as I've gotten older, because that feeling of isolation can feel really heavy. And I don't, that's why I do what I do. I don't ever want anybody to feel like they're the only one experiencing this feeling in their life. Like, we all go through it, whether we decide to talk about it or not, or verbalize it. That's a completely other discussion, but it's very normal. The things that we experience are very normal human things.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just want people to know that those people
They do.
exist, right? Whether you think it might not be your teammate, it might not be your coach, it might not be someone on a platform like I have or Aubrey has, but there is that one person who is equally afraid to
Mhm.
ask you if
Right.
you're okay. And if one of the parties reaches out, then I'm not gonna say problem solved, but then one step closer to a
Right.
solution to the need to feel seen and heard and understood, or just accept the
Right.
confusion again, because sometimes we can sit in that uncomfortability of the unknown. But again, that's a whole totally different episode. But if it just takes a moment of bravery to say, I don't know what's going on, I need your help, or vice
Mhm.
versa. Hey, I could be completely wrong. Trust me, this is uncomfortable for me to say, but do you need help? Do you need someone to listen? Do you want to just hang out? Do you want to just forget about stuff for a
Right.
little while? Like, you don't have to have the answer. And again, I think that is a huge misconception in today's world, is everything has an
Mhm.
answer. Everything has a solution. There's X, Y, and Z equals something.
Right.
Like, okay, a lot of the times it does, right? We've gotten, I'd like to think, more intelligent as a species, but every time you come up with a solution, another problem presents itself. And that's true in your mental health journey, right? Once you've, again, understood failure, okay, then you can start to fail at higher levels, right? You're no longer a teammate, you're a team captain. Failure comes along with that. You're a coach, failure comes along with that. You're an entrepreneur. Like, the feeling of failure is the same, but the reasons are different. And then it's on you again to try and figure out those reasons,
Mhm.
etc. I want to do maybe a hard shift here, if
Yeah,
you're okay with
absolutely.
it, kind of in the middle of our episode, to talk about cheerleading a little bit, because I think that's not a huge. A lot of our followers, again, I could be completely wrong. There's no box that says check if you're a cheerleader if you're listening to us, but I'd like to assume it's not a huge part of our listener base. But I want to make sure that we pay respect to them if they
Love
do.
that.
Tell us about cheerleading. Tell us about the different types
Mm.
of cheerleading. I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many, right? And then in that field, tell us about some of the mental health challenges again, because yes, you're athletes. It comes with a lot of the same struggles that we have, but again, it's so, so,
Yeah,
so different.
it's crazy. So I have an interesting perspective because not only was I an athlete myself, I was a cheerleader my whole life, cheered in college. I also coached it. I also worked in the industry, from a sales standpoint. I also built a choreography company with like my business partner at the time. So I've seen it from every which angle, right? So I really do feel like I have a really good grasp on the sport and what it can do to, people's lives positively and negatively. We are in a space that we're told that we have to look a certain way, right? Like we're supposed to fit into this box. And if you don't fit into that box, you really start to question if you belong in the sport. That goes with, cheerleading, gymnastics, a lot of women's sports, whatever it may be. But we're just conditioned to believe from a societal standpoint when you see, cheerleaders on the television or in movies or any of that which way, we fulfill all these specific stereotypes. But anybody that is in the sport and that has competed at a high level can very much debunk all of these stereotypes. They're not accurate. We're just as athletic and competitive as everyone else. But with that being said, it is a breeding ground for body image issues. And that's, there's so many factors that play into that. A lot of the stereotypes, the fact that our uniforms are tight and, revealing in some capacity. But it really puts a magnifying glass on how you're supposed to look and feel about your body. And I've watched and I experienced from my own standpoint, and then I went on to coach girls and had to, girls and boys had to watch them go through those same things that I struggled with as an athlete. So as I coached, I just tried to make the environment as welcoming as possible, no matter what your body shape is, no matter what you look like, skin color, anything, because it really started out as this very like, exclusive thing. Like you had to look a certain way, you had to weigh a certain amount to be able to, be a flyer, to wear a half top, specifically in college, right? And it's hard. It's hard because that leaks over into every aspect of your life. And anybody who's a cheerleader definitely understands exactly who I'm like what I'm talking about. Being in a sports bra and Nike pros for majority of your existence, all while having to jump up and down and like shake your palms from a game day standpoint, but also then competing at college nationals, right? There's like you said, there's so many different types of cheerleading, but it's definitely a challenging sport, and it's very hard on your mental if you let it be, if that makes sense. But I would say I would love to say cheerleading has come like leaps and bounds. I've seen so much growth in the industry, but some of those really toxic behaviors are still present. And I think that it's about calling them at the forefront and bringing them to the table and acknowledging them, and then actively taking steps towards change to make it an environment where everyone is welcome. Like the best cheerleaders I know don't look like what that stereotypical like cheerleader would fit into in a box. Weighs 100 pounds, has a six pack, blonde hair, blue eyes. Like that is not the blueprint anymore. And I'm so glad that our sport has, grown away from that. I just want it to be a space where everybody can be welcome, no matter how much you weigh, no matter what you look like. But it's tough.
Mm.
It's tough. It definitely played a toll in me having, body dysmorphia and having a really hard relationship with my body because I was, forced to be in a uniform. And I looked around and I didn't feel like, everybody looked like me. So then you start to question, is this sport really for me? It was tough. But as you get older, you realize that none of those things matter. Like the sport is for everyone, and you can be successful no matter what weight you are in the sport.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And again, I'm going to ask a few questions here just out of a place of not
Yeah,
really
no,
knowing.
absolutely. Ask away.
And I spoke to a wrestler a while back, and I wanted to ask him this question because obviously they have intense
Right.
body image
Right,
problems
right,
in
right.
wrestling. I mean, just from a standpoint of having to cut
Mhm.
weight, and from a health standpoint, that's a massive concern. But from a cheer standpoint, are there like is it safety wise, right? Is it dangerous if a flyer is over a certain amount of weight, or like I just genuinely don't know, like because again, you can be accepting, and there is ways. I'm not saying there isn't ways, but how do we still protect the people at the bottom? I don't know the
No,
term.
it's
I
okay.
apologize. How do we, the throwers? Is that,
A
I
base, a
don't,
back spot, side base, main base, back spot.
okay. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? Like there's totally this weird gray area, which makes it so difficult because like, for example, you can't, I don't know if it's possible, but we'll just choose a ridiculous way. You can't throw a 600-pound person in the air and expect to
Right.
catch them.
Yeah, no, that's
Right.
fair.
But then at the same time, you don't have to be 25 pounds to be thrown in the air. Like there's this
Right.
middle ground that we
1,000%.
can, this healthy middle ground that we can promote. How do you think we can do that?
I think
Right.
it's interesting when I work with high schoolers or college kids or whatever it may be, and someone says anything about their flyer being too heavy, right? They're being too big. And my question will always be, is your flyer too big? Are you not strong enough? Because if the second that you reframe it, the best flyers that I ever worked with from like a collegiate standpoint were just regular sized human beings, most of them tall. I think that when it comes to flexibility and lines in the air, which probably don't know what that means, um, long legs, great. Like everybody loves a flyer that has long, flexible legs because it's good for lines. I don't know how to explain it to someone that's like not and
No, no, I
okay,
can see it.
yeah,
I can
yeah,
see it. Yeah.
different body positions. It's all about uniform and creating something that is similar, right? When it comes to a stunting aspect, it's all about recreating like one thing over and over again to make it all match. It's all about synchronization. So, yeah, it's easier to all have flyers that have the same body type or that look the same, but that's not an end all be all. Like, there's so many different roles and positions for everybody in the space of cheerleading. There's people that just tumble, there's people that, might only fly and not tumble. Like there's so many different voids to be filled in the space of cheerleading. Yes, you need to be athletic and yes, you should be healthy as any other human being. But I look back on my track record of cheerleading and the best flyers that I had were never the flyers that like fit the mold, And so taking that opportunity to reframe that whenever I'm working with an athlete that's a base that is like, oh, my flyer's too heavy. And in reality, the flyer is a normal weight. She just either one, not carrying her weight from an internal standpoint and like physically, there's a lot of work that flyers have to do to be able to like center themselves to make themselves feel a little bit lighter, if that makes sense. But as a base or a back spot, is it that your flyer is not big enough or it's that you're not strong enough, that you've not been in the gym enough, that your legs aren't strong enough, that you're not using technique enough to get a flyer over your head? Obviously, we have to be reasonable in the fact that we're not throwing 600 people, like 600-pound people above our head. Like that's just the reality of the sport. Like that's not how it works. But you can have that realistic outlook and still understand that it's just like it's what each role brings to the table, just like any other sport. You know what I mean? Just like a forward in soccer isn't the same as a goalie. Like there's just certain things that you're good at that plugs you into that spot. But it's not about, you know, that the top girl. A lot of times we call it a flyer, a top girl being 100 pounds. Like it's not realistic. Now, all star in college is a little bit of a different world because with all stars, you can have younger girls who have barely hit puberty, competing with kids that are 18, 19, 20. You know what I mean? So it really varies. Whereas college, you obviously have to be in a certain age group. And that's why I've always gravitated more towards, high school and college versus all star. They're kind of different, so that side of the sport can kind of perpetuate this like misconception. And I know that that starts at such a young age because like I said, you do see these teams where they're stacked with older kids, but then your flyer is 10. Like of course she's not going to weigh a normal weight, because she's 10.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ways to look at it and a lot of things to unpack when it comes to competitive cheerleading. But specifically for college, it's like for me, I always I always harp on my athletes, like you just have to get stronger. You have to be stronger. You have to be the best version of yourself for you and then also for your teammates. And that will make everybody better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, beautifully put. And again, I think it is important to look at it, yes, from the cheer standpoint. I did kind of hit you with a hard question there, so thank
It's
you for that.
okay.
But also from that other sport standpoint, right? Like I used to play basketball,
I'm not 6 foot, but I've been this height since
Me
seventh
too.
grade. So yeah, I used to be one of the taller kids on the team, right? So like, of course I was going to play basketball. I was
Right.
taller and I was fast. I played soccer my whole life. I played some tennis. Like I just did track. Like I just did sports that made me fast. So I wasn't the best basketball player, but I could just outrun people. Well, then everyone passed me in height and I was no longer good. No one sat there and was like, oh my God, Caleb sucks because he's not 6'7". Like they knew I was good. I just didn't grow
Right.
anymore. And that was natural to me. Like this is what I'm working
Mhm.
with. I'm not
Yeah.
I think the same thing can be said for weight as well, right? That obviously maybe there's more leeway in if we control that or not, but that's a whole rabbit hole in an episode that I don't think we need to go down that right now, unless you're willing to. But like, it's like, again, for soccer, right? Ideal goalie, middle, like 6'3", 6'4", really agile, long arms. My goalie in college was
Right.
5'7", and he was an
It's
All American. Like,
there's
you just have
exceptions
to
to
be
every rule.
correct. You just have to be
Right.
good at what you do. Of course, there's these
Mhm.
ideals. This is what the quote unquote perfect
Right.
looks like. But the reality is it's just not
It's
achievable.
not for
Like
everyone.
showing up 100% of 100% is
Right.
not achievable. Getting your body to perfection, there's always going to be something, right? So I think we have to give ourselves grace in that standpoint, kind of like you said, of like, okay, maybe my teammate isn't where they want to be at. Can I get to where I need to be at to encourage them to get
Right.
to where they want to be at? Or vice versa. Maybe you're noticing that a flyer is unhealthily skinny. Can you encourage them and
Right.
say, hey, look, let's go to the gym together. Let's do this together. Let's get better together. Never make someone feel so alone because they're already going through their own battles, right? I think that's, again, not knowing much about cheer specifically. I think that transcends sports and life. Can you go through something with someone if you haven't figured out yourself, right?
Right.
Don't if you're also struggling, I'm not saying jump in it with them and just crash and burn
Right.
together. But if you have that portion, if you've taken care of yourself enough, if you've done the work, if you've gotten stronger in the gym, if you've seen a therapist, right? Can you go with your friend? Can you,
Yeah.
again, back to the beginning, make them feel seen, heard? And if they say no, they say no. Just say, okay, the invite's always there. And if it's gym, this is when I go to the gym. If it's therapy and you're willing, this is when I go to a therapist.
Right.
Feel free to swing by. If it's someone even as simple just to sit next to in the cafeteria, hey, this is when I go eat lunch. Come by if you're comfortable. Again, if you're not, don't jeopardize yourself. But I think in a team sport, again, there is that sense of responsibility of yes, you can tell when your teammates are struggling because you've seen so much time. You can tell that maybe last year they were just the pinnacle of fitness and this year they don't look like it for some
Right.
reason. You don't have to call them out in front of it. You don't have to gossip behind their back. You don't have to be rude, but can you help them, one, figure out why, or two, figure out if this is their
Mhm.
healthy and they were just super, super anal about it before. I don't know if that resonates with your sport at all because I
A
know
1000%.
any sport.
I
So
remember watching girls during national season. In college, we go to NCAA college nationals and the prep for it is just really intense. It's a grind if you don't know anything about it. But I remember watching girls who would be prepping for Daytona season and to go to Daytona to compete at college nationals. We're in bathing suits, we're in small, our uniforms 24/7 in sports bras, who would show up to practice an hour, 2 hours early to simply run sprints on the treadmill before going through a 4 hour practice because they decided to eat a cookie at you know what I mean? Like that is unfortunately
yeah.
very common in our sport. And there's ways to
Well, then you simply don't have
Right,
energy.
right.
Then
There's
that's a health risk. You just don't have energy.
there's so many things that I look back to that were so unhealthy that we were perpetuating just because it was like traditional to our sport. And until you get older and you exit the sport and you're retired, do you look back and think like, oh wow, that was an eating disorder, or wow, half of my team had body dysmorphia. Like it's just wired and conditioned into you when you learn these practices from a young age. And I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it until I was no longer outside of it, but I was miserable. I was very unhappy, like obsessing over every single thing that I was putting in my body, as most women do. That's a very, very common for girls and women to, experience. But specifically with cheerleaders, it was like this obsessive, desire to reach this, you know, perfection that wasn't obtainable. It wasn't realistic from a health standpoint whatsoever, but we were chasing after this stereotype that we were trying to fulfill. And I think the important thing that I tell people often is there's nothing wrong with wanting to grow. There's nothing wrong with wanting to change certain parts of yourself that make you unhappy from a physical standpoint. As long as you're not hating yourself in the process of that is what I condone. You know what I mean? Like you can't hate yourself into a version of you that you love. And that is really common experience for women. It's always like I'll be happy when I lose 5 more pounds or just 1 more, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, it's this toxic, narrative that we spin in our head that's been ingrained to us. It's not even our fault half the time. It's just what we feed off of. We see it and we consume it and social media and TV and, anything that we're looking at from a society standpoint is feeding off our insecurities. Like that is that is just how the world works, unfortunately. And if you're not aware of it, it can be so detrimental to your mental health. And you see it a lot in the space of cheerleading, dance, gymnastics, all these sports.
Yeah, I love what you said. There's nothing wrong with wanting to become more
Right.
fit, wanting to put on 5 pounds, wanting to lose 5 pounds. It's the reason why and the methods in which you're
Hmm.
doing so. And I think this might just maybe be bluntly saying it, but I think there just needs to be more coaches that can help with that. And again, that's not necessarily the coach's fault
Right.
either. It just means that we need to get trained. We need to understand. We sometimes, a lot of us have been in that space. Like, again, for me, soccer, going to soccer coach, you can now see some of the issues. But we just don't know how to say it. We don't know how to teach it because we were
Right.
never taught it. Can that next generation of coaches, generation of leaders and athletes say, no, enough is enough? Like, when your mental health is good, your physical health can
Right.
improve, and vice versa. When your physical health is good, your mental health can improve. That imbalance of one or the other makes it so difficult for you to, one, even have your eyes open wide enough to see that there's a
Mm.
problem, and then two, be able to address that problem, whether it's for yourself, for your student athlete, again, for your coworker. It doesn't necessarily have
Right.
to be an athlete, but this is just where we're focusing. What is one thing that, as someone in this space, and this can go outside of cheer, that you think coaches can do in order to help their athletes who, one, might want to lose that 5 pounds or might want to put on that 5 pounds? Again, we're just focusing on
Yeah.
weight here, but that want to get 5% better, I guess we can put
As
it
long
that
as
way.
you're doing it from a place of love and a place of wanting to grow and not from a place of shame, I think like that is the
Mm.
biggest key to helping other people change and to pushing them towards becoming the best version of themselves. Like I said, like we talked about this earlier, but like shame and guilt is this like really heavy emotion to carry, and it doesn't make us the best version of ourselves. So as long as we're welcoming with open arms that the reason that you're choosing to lose the 5 pounds or to lift more, to change the way that you're eating is so that you can be the healthiest version of yourself rather than because I think that you should be thinner and you would be more loved or more athletic if you were thinner. Like that is the blueprint, right? Like you can't shame people into wanting to change. You have to want it from within, and you have to want it for like good reasons and not, for superficial reasons. But I think just also being willing to change the narrative. Like I said, there was so many practices that I did as a kid that I could have easily perpetuated and put on my college kids. Like, oh, because it was this way for me, it must be that way for you. But it's being able to recognize that a lot of those things that I was taught, they were wrong. There was just no one to tell me that they were wrong. So being able to acknowledge that and then not pass that down to the next generation of athletes, of coworkers, whatever it may be, that is how we create the change. But sitting and saying we've always done it this way, like that is such a dangerous phrase in sports and every aspect of life. And we're living in a time now where it's running rampant. So I think just being willing to admit that you had experienced things that weren't healthy and that weren't good, and then being able to make the shift towards changing it for the people underneath you is so incredibly important.
Yeah, I think one of the best questions that I adopted as an assistant coach was, what do you need from me?
Mm, I love
On the
that.
days that I was able to provide it, what do you need from me? I played, obviously, male sport athlete, but then I coached female sports. So I didn't know a lot of what they needed, right? I didn't know anything really besides the fact that, oh, they played the same sport as me and they're on the other side, so it must be
Right.
the same, right? Like day one, I came in and I was basically like I pretended like I was team captain. Like I just brought over the same things. I was yelling, I was doing
Mhm.
this, and I was like, wait a minute, this is not what this team needs. And I think when I said like, hey, what do you need from me? And they were like, what? And I was like, what do you need
Mm.
from me? Like, I'm your coach. I have expectations for you. It's my job to get the best out of you. So there is times where I'm like, hey, I hear you. Let me try and figure
Right.
that out. But this is what I need from you right now. It has to be that give and take. And I think, again, I've had the privilege of coaching under some really good head coaches who do very similar things. But I think it's even tough for us as coaches to say, like, no, trust me, I know what's right. Like, I've done this for 20 some odd years now. Like, I see the end result. Maybe you can't, but how can I get you there in a way that is beneficial to you and the rest of the team? It's not, okay, let's do 40 sprints because you guys don't
Right.
understand. Maybe it's, hey, let's do team fitness at the end. Yeah, I'm a little ticked off that you guys were joking around and whatever today because it's my job. Like, I'm not going to let you get
Right.
away with it. But this fitness is going to be beneficial for you in the
Mhm.
long run. Next day, we show up and it's like, okay, we did what I wanted to do yesterday. We need to get through this in practice. But for the last 30 minutes, what did you guys see on the field? What do you think you need to work on? Let's break up and do shooting. Some of you might want to do fitness. You can go do fitness. Like, I think that was one of the best things that our coaches adopted for at least some of the season, especially as we get further down the
I
road
love
into a
that.
season. Again, in work as deadlines approach, right? Like you're doing all this hard work. You just need even 30 minutes to just say, this is what I
Mhm.
need. And it's never not do anything, right? Because that's not
Right.
productive from a team standpoint unless you're
Mhm.
injured. It's okay. What do you need? Is it watching film? There's so many different needs of each individual that providing that space again for your sport cheer can be
Right.
beneficial. I guess I'll center it more to you again before we kind of wrap up. What is one thing as I guess, an advocate now or a coach that you do that your team has asked you for? Because I know this is not a new concept to you either. I'm sure you do this, ask your students what they need. What is one thing they've asked you for that has worked? And then maybe one thing that they've asked you for that you're like, okay, maybe we learned together that that's not actually what we needed. We can push that to
Yeah,
the side.
so I started to implement something at the end of every single practice. Now, I will preface this with saying I no longer coach. I was the head coach for 5 years at Northern Illinois University, but I have since hung up my shoes. I will be back though. I mark my words. I love coaching too much to stop forever, but something that I learned was one, it's really important to get to know each athlete individually. The sign of a good coach is knowing how each athlete needs to be coached, right? I know that if I scream and yell at Sam, she's going to cry and shut down. I know that if I scream and yell at Justine, it's going to make her the best version of herself. Each athlete needs something
Hmm.
different, but it's about learning them and figuring out how to make them the best version of themselves. That's number one for starters. Is it's truly getting to know your athlete past the athlete and know them as a human being, know them as a person. That is rule number one to coaching, at least the way that I figured out works best for coaching. And then as I realized what was necessary for me was to nurture my athletes from the inside out. It was less about how the practice went that day and more about at the end of the practice giving them 10 to 15 minutes to respond to a couple questions that I would ask them. They each individually had their own journal, right? I went out and I bought journals for them and I would prompt them with a series of questions, 1 to 2 questions at the end of every practice. They would reflect, it would cause them to unpack how the practice went in whatever way, good or bad. And then every single practice would end on an affirmation. So I would say an affirmation, the whole team would respond back to me. And at first, I was like, okay, Aubrey, is this actually helping? Are we wasting the last 15 minutes of practice? But I realized a shift in their not only connection to themselves, but the connection as a team as a whole with each other. And then I remember one day we were rushing. We had a long nationals practice. It was not a great practice at all. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to skip it. None of them care. I was very frustrated with them until I go to, roll up the mats, everything, head home. And they were like, what, we're not we're not doing the journal. Like, what do you mean? Like, and I was like, oh, I didn't think you guys cared. I didn't think it was doing anything. As a coach, we get so exhausted sometimes feeling like we're not reaching our athletes. And it was in that moment that all the team was like, no, like this is how we on practice and it helps us. We have to do it. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is actually working. So it was really just taking a moment to pause at the end of every single practice and just prompting them with a series of questions that force them to look inside of themselves and unpack the way that they were feeling or how practice went. And from that moment on, when I started doing that, I just saw a complete shift in a lot of them as athletes, but more importantly, them as human beings. And it's still to this day something that I do in each workshop that I do. I wrote a workbook, and each person in the workshop has the workbook, and it's just a series of questions and questions that you probably wouldn't normally ask yourself or have someone ask you, coupled with little pieces of my writing in between. But yeah, just really taking the time to self reflect is something that a lot of us don't do. We're in this like fast paced environment, especially as athletes 24/7, where it's go, 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 go. What can I do to be a better person? And dig internally versus what the skill is. What can I do to be better in the gym? Like all these things are correlating. Your brain is just as important as your body. It's a domino effect. They're all connected together. So doing those little things with each athlete really, really changed like the morale of the team for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it goes back to just being a
Right.
human, like you said. So often oh, Caleb, you're a soccer player and your identity is tied to solely
Hmm.
soccer. Or for you for a long time, oh, Aubrey, cheerleader, good for you, coach. Like just all these things surrounding one aspect of your life. You either become obsessed or with that aspect, or you forget that you're so much more than just that one
A
dimension of
thousand
you.
percent.
And we see it all the time with pro sports, right? Like when their personal life is in line, when they're playing well, like there's a
Hmm.
relation there. If there's no other half to the professional athlete in terms of significant other, if they're taken care of, like their physical needs, their mental needs, if
Right.
they're feeling good, it correlates more, not necessarily to wins, but to performance on the field. And then you just feel better when you understand that I could go and I could play as hard as I can or perform as hard as I can for 2 hours, and I could have a loss or a win, which they feel totally different. But then 3 hours later, okay, I'm back to my normal life. I have, again, student athlete class to get to. I have
Hmm.
friends to hang out with. I have homework to, like, there's so much more to
Hmm.
you than what happens between those
Right.
lines. For me, the trick is, can you figure out how to make the time between those lines the best part of your
Mm.
day? And once I started to do that and understand, like, look, I could have just failed a test. Probably happened too many times for my liking, but I just failed a test and then I need to go play a game. Let's use it to enjoy. Yes, you have a right to be upset that you failed a test. Yes, you have a right to be upset that maybe you're in an argument with your significant other. Yes, you have upset, or you have a right to have feelings. Can you leave them at the edge of that line, at the edge of your performance surface, wherever you
Hmm.
are, the pool, and just enjoy that time with your teammates? And then again, maybe you can resume and pick it up when you leave, but can you really use that time to do what you love and worry about nothing else? And that's not possible all the time, right? It's really not. It sounds ideal, but can we get as close to that as possible? And I think that's when you see the success, when you can, or whatever your version of success. For me, as a college athlete, it was wins, obviously, or good performances. How do we get there more often? I think that's why people coach. That's why we
Right.
advocate, because we understand that it's not
Hmm.
possible. You are allowed to struggle. You're allowed to experience all those emotions, but there's just so much joy and just happiness that comes when you start to see things from the other side and you start to understand a little bit more and you start to see the beauty in the struggle and you start to want to take on the challenges. And you, again, soccer player, you start connecting a couple passes, and even if you miss the net, like, oh my god, those were the best passes I've had
Right.
all day. Like, you can, if I was so blinded by what happened
Hmm.
before, I wouldn't be able to see that. Or if I was so focused on, oh, you needed to score the goal, I wouldn't be able to accept that everything was wonderful up until that point.
As athletes, I feel like
And I
it's
think what
easy
you're
to get robbed of the joy of our sport because we're so
mm,
fixated on
yes.
winning, right? Especially coming from a standpoint of one, I've been competitive my whole life. Like I will not do anything without the intent to win it. Like I've always been very competitive. But if you allow that pressure to seep in, it will rob you of every ounce of joy that your sport or whatever it
Mm,
is brings you. It's about just being able to exist and be present in the moment. All anxiety does is rob you of of that current moment. There is no amount of worry, anxiety, pressure that can change the outcome of whatever is supposed to happen, but it will rob you of the current moment. And that is something that a really hard lesson to learn. But if you walk throughout life with this constant pressure as an athlete, you won't enjoy anything. You won't enjoy anything. And like that is when you see athletes start to burn out or their mental health to decline or their performance to go right out the window with it. It's like you stop falling in love with the thing that you initially set out to do. You don't love the sport anymore because you associate it with this like deep pressure. But if you would just exist and enjoy it and be present in the moment and let all those pressures try to like roll off your shoulders, you'd be so much happier. And I know it's so much easier said than done. And again, as someone who thrived in competitive spaces and I just wanted to win, I was a very hard coach. Like I wanted to win. Nobody sets out and is from an athletic standpoint to do something and not win it. But you realize that in the grand scheme of life, it's not that serious. Like I look back to all the moments in my life that gave me so much anxiety, so much overwhelming anxiety. It did nothing for me. It robbed me of that moment. But like nobody is talking about that I didn't win college nationals in 2013 when we lost by like a point and a half. Do I remember it still? Absolutely. Absolutely. Will I let it go? Probably not. But it doesn't matter. People don't remember it. You know what I mean? Like there's so much more to life than all of these moments that we accumulate as athletes, all these pressures, all these, painful experiences, loss, whatever it may be. But when you make it out on the other side, like you realize how like unserious those parts of your life are. And not to diminish anybody's sport, whether you're playing at the collegiate or the professional level, like that is the center of someone's universe. And I can most certainly empathize with that.
oh
But
yeah.
you are so much more than a sport. Like you are a human being before you are an athlete. And you have to remember that. You have to like ground yourself in knowing that.
Yeah, wanting to succeed, having goals, that's all admirable, but at the end of the day, you're not going to hit them all. And it's how you can handle the ones that you don't hit that again reminds you that you're not just an athlete or you're not just a businesswoman, you're not just a CEO, like whatever you're doing, right? It's what you do, it's not necessarily who you are. Again, if your reason why is tied to what you do, there's power in that
Right.
as well, but again, it's not 100%. It's just this it's to me it's just this fascinating gray area of how do we all exist and how do we all succeed and again, probably another hour long episode. We could have you back on for that. But I want to touch on this really quick before moving into the last part of our episode, how we end every episode. But when if you want to get joy back in your sport, coach beginners. Oh my
Mm.
God. Coach little kids like 4 to 6 years. I did it again. It reminded me that I don't want kids anytime soon, but it reminded me how fun my sport was because similar to you, the end of my career, as much as it was successful, I didn't see that success. Like we got to the championship game of our conference for the first time in 40 years, but I was like, oh, it wasn't successful because we got absolutely blown away in
Mm.
the last game. It's like, no, you haven't been there in 40 years. That's a
That's a
success in
huge
itself. Or
success.
like I was an all region player, but then it was like, oh, well, I wasn't all American. Like I know I could have done better. It was that, again, like you said in the beginning, that vision you had for yourself that didn't pan out. You forgot to see how well you already did. Same thing with my teammates, right? Like there was so many of us that were breaking records and our team records, not even just individual. And we were just so dead set on we need to win the championship that when we didn't, we were just like, well, that was
Right.
fun, but
But we
like it wasn't
lost. Yeah.
fulfilling. Right. But then going back to coach these little kids, to coach these beginners, it was like they were excited when they got 3 juggles on the ball. Like their face lit up, their parents were cheering, or like, but then vice versa, they would cry when they didn't get 3 again. And then you're like, oh my gosh, it's already
It's
setting in. Like they're already setting these goals for themselves. So it's like, but you don't tell a little kid, like, oh, you dummy, you didn't do
Mhm.
5. It's like, no, you did 3 last time you did 2. That's
Right.
fantastic. Again, whole other episode. When do we grow out of that? That's
Sad.
what fascinates me. But it's like, if you want to get that joy back, go coach beginners and just watch their joy, watch their face light up. Just, oh my God, it's so
Yeah,
fulfilling.
I totally agree.
Before we move into the last segment here, I did want to thank you for your time and all the effort that you do for the mental health space. Obviously, it's no secret who you are and what you do for the space, but I wanted to provide you with an opportunity to let my listeners know, or our listeners know, where they can find you. Again, maybe that workbook,
Yeah.
if that's something that they want to implement in their community or use themselves. Like, where can we find
Yeah,
you
so my
if
workbook
people have
is
resonated?
actually on Amazon. If you were to just type in my name, Aubrey Gallione, in the search bar, it would pop up. Also, my socials at Project Love You. U is just the letter U. So the thought behind the name for me, and I always like to talk about this because I wonder if it translates to other people. But like I said at the beginning of the episode, we have 12 years of required education in this country, but nobody teaches you how to have a healthy relationship with your mind and your body. So I picked U instead of YOU in my brain for like university. So like a self-love university. But yeah, I mean, you can find me on any of my social handles, hopefully in a city near you when we expand and do workshops. I'm in Chicago right now, but hopefully, within the year, LA and New York as well. But yeah, I'm looking forward to connecting with more of you guys, anybody listening. I'm just focused on creating spaces for people to be their most authentic self and to connect deeper to themselves, but the people around them as well.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. We'll definitely link all that below, everywhere that we're able to find you. And if you could find her in another spot there on social media, tag it below, because we want everyone, whatever community you belong to, that's her goal. We want you to find her and get that help you need. But I think the main ones, probably TikTok, Instagram, all those. I say Facebook, but I think, again, that's reserved for
Yeah,
us
no,
older people
I'm
now.
on
So we'll
Facebook,
leave
but
you
only
alone on
because I have to
Facebook.
be. You know what I mean? I don't use it.
That's me. That's me. But yeah, so if you're okay, we'll move into the final segment here on the Make Mental podcast. We end every single episode with the same question. And again, I always love the similarities, but also the difference in the responses. So Aubrey, are you ready for your final question on this
I'm
episode of the Make
so
Mental
ready,
podcast?
Caleb.
All right. So if there is one person in the entire world right now that needs a hug from you, who would you give it to and why?
That needs a hug from me. Do our do they have to be alive? Is that a morbid question?
Whoever you're thinking of.
I don't know if this sounds like cliche. I think two answers come to mind. I would love to hug the younger version of myself. And I would also like to tell her that she was going to be okay and she was going to make it out. And then also, like I said, I lost someone close to me to suicide. So if I ever had the opportunity to hug Hannah and tell her that she is so loved, she will always be so loved, and that I wish she was still here, I would choose her.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And again, it's always so lovely to provide that space for you guys to kind of, like you said, realize the growth you've done and then show someone some love who
Yeah,
needs it.
absolutely.
So I know she received the hug, if that helps you. I know she
Me too.
received the hug. If you can feel that she did. Yeah, well, thank you again for spending just over an hour here with us. Again, if you want to follow Aubrey more, be a part of Project Love You. I like that now.
Okay,
Now that I
I'm
can see
glad
it in
I'm
that
glad
way.
that I explained that because I always wonder, I'm like, do people really see it as like
Yeah.
you, or it's like a double?
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. And I think, again, as you grow and become the powerhouse that you are, it will definitely stick. So we're excited to follow that journey. But again, if anyone else wants to follow, I'm tipping over back there. Did you see that? If anyone else wants to follow that journey, we'll tag it below. And again, if this episode really resonated with you, I always say a follow is free. So go
Love that.
support her so she can support others. Thank you again, Aubrey, for coming on, and we really appreciate your time. And I'm just super excited to see where you take Project Love You. And maybe when you get back into coaching, we can.
Absolutely. I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Caleb. And I love everything you're doing as well. I really appreciated having this conversation and meeting other human beings that I feel connected to and aligned with. So thank you for all the work that you do as well.